I never thought I'd stand in front of the Kaaba and feel fear. The house of God, a place I'd always imagined wrapped in safety, guarded by faith itself, now felt tense, almost fragile. It was the year 1979. The dawn call to prayer had just faded, the early light spilling across the marble floor. Pilgrims were moving slowly, quietly in the rhythm of worship, and then the sound, it wasn't a sound you expect in Mecca. Not the murmurs of prayer, not the rustle of feet, but a sharp, echoing crack. Gunfire. At first, people froze, unsure. The sanctuary of the Kaaba had never been touched by such violence in living memory. But in moments, the fear spread faster than the bullets. I saw men shouting, pointing, some running toward the gates, others trying to shield their families. Then they appeared armed men storming into the courtyard. Their leader's voice boomed, claiming the mosque, claiming God's will. And for the first time in centuries, the Grand Mosque was under siege. They moved like they'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Some blocked the gates, locking out anyone who might escape or bring help. Others climbed to the minarets, rifles slung across their backs, scanning the courtyard like hunters watching prey. The leader, Juhayman al-Otaibi, stood in the shadow of the Kaaba, his voice echoing through the mosque. He spoke with the conviction of a man who believed the world was ending. His claim was shocking, that he had found the Mahdi, the guided one, who would purify Islam and lead the faithful. The pilgrims didn't know whether to run or to listen. Some believed him. Others stood frozen, holding their prayer beads, whispering verses under their breath. I stayed low, pressed against a marble column, watching as they unfurled their banners. The black cloth against the white marble felt like a stain. In that moment, the Kaaba, the heart of Islam, was no longer a place of peace. It was a fortress. And then the doors were sealed. No one in, no one out. Outside, the city didn't yet know what was happening. Inside, we were trapped, and the hours began to stretch into something darker. The first few hours felt unreal. No gunfire, no shouting, just a strange, heavy quiet that wrapped around the entire courtyard like a shroud. The men with rifles moved in slow, deliberate steps, their eyes scanning the crowd. Every so often, one of them would bark an order, "Sit, don't move." And the sound would echo off the marble, sending chills down my spine. People huddled in small groups, whispering prayers. Mothers clutched their children close. Some men stared at the floor, afraid to meet the gunman's gaze. The Kaaba stood at the center, its black cloth swaying gently in the breeze. I had seen it so many times before, but never like this. It was no longer just the house of God, it was the center of a siege. Hours turned into a full day. Food ran out, water was rationed. And outside the sealed gates, the world was finally starting to realize what had happened. Soldiers gathered beyond the walls, helicopters circled overhead, and we knew whatever came next would shatter the silence. The silence ended with a sound I will never forget. A single gunshot, sharp, deafening, cracking through the still air. Then chaos. Automatic fire rattled against the marble walls, sending chips of stone flying. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the faint scent of incense that still lingered from morning prayers. Soldiers had breached the outer gates, their boots thundered across the courtyard as they took cover behind pillars, returning fire toward the militants entrenched near the Kaaba. Inside, terrified worshippers lay flat on the cold floor, shielding their heads. Some cried, others whispered verses of the Quran, their voices trembling but steady. From where I hid, I could see flashes of light with every burst of gunfire. The sound bounced off the surrounding arches, making it impossible to tell where shots were coming from. And yet, in the midst of all that chaos, the Kaaba still stood, untouched. Every bullet seemed to miss it, as if the ancient walls were under divine protection. But we knew the battle had only just begun, and no one inside was safe. The first hours of the siege were a blur of gunfire, smoke, and shouted commands. By midday, the army had surrounded the entire Grand Mosque. No one could enter and no one could leave. From my position, I could see soldiers moving in tight formations, advancing inch by inch. Their faces were tense, glistening with sweat despite the cool stone beneath their feet. The militants were ruthless. They fired from every shadow, using the sacred walls as cover. Each time the soldiers gained ground, the attackers pushed them back with a hail of bullets. But the army had something the militants didn't: patience. They began sealing every possible escape route, one by one. The gates were reinforced, the outer corridors blocked. Slowly, the circle around the Kaaba tightened.
Loudspeakers echoed across the courtyard, urging the militants to surrender. There was no reply, only more gunfire.
From the upper balconies, I could see the Kaaba at the center of it all, still untouched, still standing as the heart of the storm. The sight filled me with a strange mix of fear and awe, because deep down, I knew, when the army finally made their move, the bloodshed would be unimaginable. The night before the assault was tense. No one slept. The soldiers huddled in corners, cleaning their rifles over and over. Commanders whispered in low voices, marking the last details of the plan. Just before dawn, the air changed. You could feel it, that heavy silence before a storm. Then, the call came. The army moved in. They advanced through the marble corridors in tight lines, shields raised, guns ready. Explosions echoed inside the sacred mosque as they blasted through fortified doors. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the faint scent of incense still lingering from the days before the siege. The militants fought with desperate fury. From the minarets, from hidden rooms beneath the floor, they struck with everything they had. The soldiers pressed forward, step by step, bullet by bullet. The sound was deafening, gunfire ricocheting off stone, shouts of pain, the crash of debris falling from above. Then, for the first time in 2 weeks, they reached the Kaaba itself. The black cloth swayed gently in the dust-filled air, untouched by the chaos around it. And for a brief second, even in the middle of war, everything seemed still. But the fight wasn't over. The underground chambers beneath the Grand Mosque still held the heart of the resistance. And going down there would be the deadliest part of all. The entrance to the tunnels was hidden behind a thick wooden door near the base of one of the mosque's inner walls. It had been barricaded, reinforced with steel from the inside. The soldiers planted charges. One last deep breath, then the blast. A wave of dust and splinters rushed out as the door gave way. The first team moved in, flashlights cutting through the suffocating darkness. The air underground was hot and stale. The narrow tunnels twisted in every direction, lined with stone and echoing with the shouts of fighters deeper within. The militants knew these passages. They'd prepared them for weeks, maybe months. Every few meters, traps waited. Tripwires, booby traps, makeshift barricades. Every corner could be an ambush. The soldiers fought inch by inch, their footsteps pounding in the darkness, their shadows stretching against the walls. Gunfire roared in the tight space, deafening and blinding. Some tunnels opened into larger chambers, lit only by flickering lanterns. In one, stacks of weapons and crates of ammunition, proof of just how far this plot had gone. But deeper still, in the lowest chamber, was the stronghold. The leaders of the siege were there, ready to fight until the last bullet. And as the soldiers raised their rifles, they knew the end was finally within reach. The chamber fell silent for a heartbeat, the kind of silence that feels heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then it erupted. Gunfire thundered in the enclosed space, every shot magnified 100 times by the stone walls. Sparks danced from ricochets, and the smell of burning gunpowder filled the air. The militants fought like men who had nothing left to lose. They darted between crates, using every shadow for cover, unleashing bursts of fire that pinned the soldiers down. One soldier crawled forward, tossing a flashbang into the center of the room. Bang! The white light exploded, and for a few precious seconds, the defenders were blinded. That was the opening. The soldiers surged in, shouting, their boots slamming against the floor. Close quarters combat broke out. Rifles used like clubs, knives flashing, men grappling in the dust and chaos. Some militants surrendered, dropping their weapons and collapsing to the ground. Others refused, choosing to fight until the very last moment. And then it was over. The last echoes of gunfire faded, replaced by the steady, ragged breathing of the soldiers. The stronghold had fallen. The siege was ending. But as the soldiers stood among the wreckage, they knew the world outside would never forget what had happened beneath the Kaaba. When the dust finally settled, the soldiers emerged from the underground chambers into the soft, blinding light of the courtyard. Above them, the Kaaba stood, scarred but unbroken. The black kiswa cloth swayed gently in the desert breeze, as if untouched by the chaos that had raged beneath its shadow. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and sand. Civilians who had been trapped nearby were slowly led to safety, their faces pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Some wept openly. Others simply stared at the sacred structure, whispering prayers of gratitude. The call to prayer eventually rose again, hesitant at first, then stronger. It was the sound that told the world the siege was over. But the scars remained. Bullet holes pitted the stone. Blood stained the marble in places where soldiers and militants had fallen. It was a sobering reminder of how close the holiest site in Islam had come to destruction. In the days that followed, news of the attacks spread across the globe. The world condemned the violence, and Muslims everywhere grieved. Yet they also found a renewed sense of unity. The Kaaba had endured for centuries, and it had endured once again. And for those who had fought to protect it, there was no greater honor than to know they had stood between sacred ground and those who sought to defile it. Centuries from now, when historians write about this chapter, they will speak of courage and sacrifice. But more importantly, they will speak of the Kaaba's unshakable place in the hearts of millions. This wasn't just a battle over stone walls. It was a battle over faith itself. The Kaaba has stood through empires rising and falling, through floods and wars, through the footsteps of prophets and the prayers of generations. And each time it was threatened, it stood, not because of its structure, but because of what it represents. To every Muslim, it is the heart of the earth, the place where heaven's gaze is constant. And so, the day the Kaaba was attacked will forever remind us. No matter who comes against it, the spirit it holds can never be taken, and the unity it inspires can never be broken. The stones may bear scars, but the faith remains unshaken.